Three things happened this week that most newsrooms are treating as separate stories. American and Iranian diplomats touched down in Islamabad for talks that could either end a war or just delay the next one. A Ukrainian city started evacuating its last remaining civilians under live Russian drone fire. A city that, 12 months ago, people were still calling a secure rear position, and 3 Russian submarines ran coordinated operations off the British coast and impressed the very naval officers paid to sound the alarm. 3 stories, 1 argument. So here's where we are. U.S. and Israeli forces struck Iran in late February 2026. Since those opening strikes, the whole region has been swinging between active conflict and the threat of it starting again. What Iran's parliamentary speaker carefully described as a pause, not a ceasefire. A pause. That word choice matters, and I'll come back to it. That pause has cracked open a small diplomatic window, and that window is now open in Islamabad, Pakistan. It's an interesting choice of venue, neutral enough that neither side has to look like they blinked by showing up, and close enough to Tehran's strategic comfort zone that Iran can credibly say they came on their own terms. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, things are moving faster than Western coverage is willing to admit. Russia is closing in on the last serious Ukrainian fortified defense line in Donbass, the chain of cities running through Konstantinovka, Kramatorsk, and Slavyansk. Children are being evacuated from Kramatorsk. Russian artillery is now within range. Putin declared a brief Easter truce, roughly 48 hours, which gave everyone a breather before it all picks back up. And off the British coast, Russia ran a coordinated 3-submarine operation in the North Atlantic. A senior British naval analyst called it, publicly, frankly, impressive. Let me start with who's actually in the room in Islamabad, because the delegations tell you a lot. The American side is led by Vice President J.D. Vance. Witkoff is there, he's been Trump's main negotiator through most of this, and Jared Kushner. On the Iranian side, you've got Speaker Ghalibaf, Foreign Minister Araghchi, senior security officials, and representatives from Iran's central bank. That last one jumped out at me. You don't bring your central bankers to a ceasefire negotiation. You bring them when you're actually working out what the economic settlement looks like on the other side. Now, the way most media is framing these talks is 2 sides who've beaten each other up and are both looking for an exit. America launched the most intense aerial campaign in the region since Iraq, wants to declare some kind of success and step back. Iran absorbed real infrastructure damage, wants sanctions relief and security guarantees. Pakistan is playing the trusted middleman, a role it's played with mixed results over the years, but one that suits its own regional ambitions perfectly. That framing isn't wrong, it's just not the whole picture. What it gets right. Both sides genuinely need to de-escalate. America's economic situation is not good right now. Inflation is up. A congressional by-election was just held in a Georgia district that Republicans previously won by 29 points. The margin this time was 12. That kind of electoral signal has a way of sharpening a president's focus on things closer to home. Iran isn't celebrating either. The country took serious hits. Infrastructure was damaged. The population has been living through real hardship. There's no clean "we won" story available to Tehran. What they have is a resilience story. And resilience, as I've said before, isn't a program of government. But, and this is the thing most coverage keeps glossing over, the 2 delegations sitting across from each other are not equivalent. The Iranian team is a machine, career specialists, people who've spent years living inside the sanctions architecture, who know exactly which levers bend and which don't, and who've been preparing for this kind of negotiation their entire professional lives. The American side has historically shown up to these meetings with Witkoff and Kushner. I'll be diplomatic. Their instincts are those of real estate dealmakers, not strategic negotiators. And their familiarity with Iranian political economy is, let's just say, it wouldn't get them very far in a job interview in Tehran. Vance changes the picture somewhat. He's a politician with actual skin in this game, not an envoy whose main career exists somewhere else. That matters. But whether the team assembled behind him genuinely matches the depth of what Iran brought, that'll shape everything that comes out of this. Asymmetric negotiating teams don't produce balanced outcomes. They produce outcomes that reflect the asymmetry. That's just how it works. And then there's what these talks are actually about. The public talking points will be enrichment levels, monitoring, sanctions timelines, regional security guarantees. All of that is real. But the single most consequential item on the table is getting almost no attention in Western coverage. Iran currently controls the Strait of Hormuz. Think of it like a toll booth on the world's most important oil pipeline. Roughly 20% of global oil supply passes through that narrow stretch of water. Right now, ships are not moving freely through it. And Tehran has been very clear through multiple official channels that this isn't a temporary wartime inconvenience. This is a structural demand. Iran intends to remain, in their own words, the permanent sovereign authority over transit through the strait, with the right to charge fees. The British historian Niall Ferguson wrote a big piece in the London Times drawing the obvious parallel. Suez, 1956. A Western military operation launched to stop a smaller country from controlling a critical waterway, which ended with that smaller country in control of the waterway. Egypt got the Suez Canal. Iran, by the look of things, is getting the Strait of Hormuz. The attacking party launched. The attacked party ended up holding the choke point. Same story, different costumes. If these talks end with Iran holding formal or functional sovereignty over the strait, which I think is now more likely than not, we're not looking at a footnote in this conflict's history. We're looking at a turning point in the global economy. To understand why Iran turned up in Islamabad with something less than open arms, you need to know what happened the last time Washington said it wanted to talk. On 28th of February 2026, I'll say that date once, because what it represents deserves that precision. U.S. and Israeli forces struck Iran. What's since come out, through a detailed New York Times reconstruction, is this. Even as American envoys were sitting with Iranian counterparts in Geneva. In the days before, the United States was actively tracking a meeting that Supreme Leader Khamenei was about to hold at his residence in Tehran. The timing and location of that meeting fed directly into the decision to launch when they did. The goal was assassination. And Witkoff and Kushner, whatever else you want to say about them, were in those Geneva meetings with full knowledge that the operation was being planned in the background. The Iranians were being told one thing at the table. A completely different conversation was happening in a different room. I'm sorry, but that's not diplomacy. That's intelligence collection wearing a diplomat's lapel pin. And the Iranians are not naive people. They've now sat through 3 distinct negotiation phases with this administration, before the conflict that started in summer 2025, in the run-up to what began on the date I just mentioned, and now. Both previous phases ended in either bad faith or outright attack. So when I say they arrived in Islamabad with something less than enthusiasm, I don't mean they're reluctant. I mean they've done this before, and they know exactly what can go wrong. Here's my read on their actual position, though. They're not coming as supplicants. They're coming as the party holding the single most important card in any settlement. When you control the waterway that 20% of global oil transits through, you're not petitioning for favorable terms. You're setting them. The domestic politics run in Tehran's favor, too. Trump's midterm arithmetic is getting worse. The Georgia election I mentioned wasn't an anomaly. It's happening in the context of rising consumer prices, an expensive and visibly messy Middle East campaign, and a political base that's starting to show signs of fatigue. The administration can't quickly rebuild its military position in the region even if it wanted to. There are reports circulating in the American press that these talks are just cover, buying time for more U.S. force deployments in the Middle East. Maybe. But even if that's true, it runs into a wall. More deployments don't change the strategic reality in the strait. Iran knows this. I think Washington knows this too, even if it's not something anyone will say out loud. Which makes the Islamabad talks, underneath all the diplomatic theater, something close to an acknowledgement of who actually holds the cards, even if nobody will frame it that way at a press conference. Could something change that? Yes. An American delegation that's genuinely there to negotiate, backed by real expertise, willing to build something durable rather than just run out the clock. Vance's presence at least opens that door. He reportedly opposed the course the U.S. took before all this, which suggests he's at least not emotionally invested in repeating it. But the institutional habits that got us here, thin delegations, bad faith timelines, decision-making built on Israeli intelligence assessments that turned out to be comprehensively wrong, those don't vanish because someone new is sitting at the head of the table. They have to be deliberately replaced. Whether that's actually happened is what the next few weeks will tell us. While everyone's been watching Islamabad, the war in Ukraine has been quietly moving toward what may turn out to be its decisive phase, and I genuinely don't think that's being covered with anything close to the seriousness it deserves. Konstantinovka, the southernmost city in the last major Ukrainian fortified line in Donbass, is in its final days. Russian forces are inside the industrial district and the high-rise areas. Ukrainian supply lines in the city have, by Ukrainian accounts, collapsed. Russia has been dropping FAB-3000 bombs on Ukrainian positions there. Just so you know what those are, they're the largest bombs being used tactically by any air force in active combat anywhere in the world right now. Enormous things. And they've been landing with increasing regularity. To the north of there, Kramatorsk is already under direct Russian drone and artillery fire. Civilian evacuation has started. Russian forces have reached the ridge at a place called Raya Alexandrovka, a hill overlooking both the city and the roads running in and out of it. When Konstantinovka falls, and I say when, not if, the situation in Kramatorsk doesn't become difficult. It becomes untenable. What I think is really being missed here is the scale of what this means strategically. The fortified belt Ukraine built between 2014 and the start of the full-scale invasion represents a decade of defensive work. Once it goes, it's gone. There's no comparable architecture between Russian forces and the Dnieper River on the other side. The road toward Dnipro opens up. Ukrainian positions in Kharkiv face potential outflanking. Sumy, which is already reportedly under pressure, gets increasingly exposed. These aren't worst-case cascade scenarios I'm dreaming up. They're just the logical consequence of the map as it currently stands. Now consider this. In a recent prisoner and body exchange, Russia returned 1,000 Ukrainian bodies. Ukraine returned 41 Russian bodies. The standard explanation is that advancing forces collect more enemy dead than defending forces. Fine. But that's an admission that Russia is advancing. That's a bit awkward for the front is stable narrative that's been running in Western media for 18 months. Then there are the submarines. 3 coordinated Russian vessels from the Northern Fleet operating off the British coast. A former Royal Navy officer publicly said it was, frankly, impressive. He was right. He then turned around and accepted Ukrainian accounts of devastating operations against Russia's Black Sea Fleet without apparent friction. Here's the thing. The Northern Fleet and the Black Sea Fleet are not 2 different navies. They're the same navy in 2 different theaters. If you're impressed by the capability in one place, that's your baseline for the other. Applying that logic selectively is a habit worth examining. The thread I keep pulling on across all 3 of these stories is the same one. A consistent self-reinforcing Western habit of misreading what the other side can actually do, and the consequences of that misreading arriving faster and in a more concentrated form than expected. Israeli intelligence told Washington that Iran's air defenses were gone, its missile arsenal depleted, Hezbollah neutralized. Washington believed it and acted accordingly. The results were, to use the politest word available, instructive. Ukrainian military communiques told Western capitals that Russian offensives were being blunted, losses unsustainable, the front essentially stable. Western capitals believed it. The front is not stable. British strategic thinking about Russian naval capability focused on a damaged Black Sea surface fleet. The Atlantic, apparently, wasn't paying close enough attention. In every case, the pattern is identical. Wishful thinking dressed up as intelligence assessment, repeated until it becomes conventional wisdom, acted upon, with consequences that are still compounding. The Islamabad talks are a consequence of that failure. So is the evacuation of Kramatorsk. So are 3 Russian submarines operating comfortably off the British coast. The world is not reshaping itself along the lines that the dominant Western narrative of the past decade suggested it would. Reality charges late fees, and right now, several of those invoices are arriving at the same time. Whether the Islamabad talks hold or collapse, whether Kramatorsk falls before summer, whether those submarines off Britain are mapping NATO's detection gaps or simply making a point, the answers are coming, and they're coming faster than the narratives around them are adjusting. We'll be following all of it on this channel. If you found this useful, like and subscribe. There's more to come on this. Stay sharp.